Hello, all you wonderful people. Great having you with me as we lift the lid to examine and dissect the plans of the powers that ought not to be. Okay, let's have a monologue together. I hear a lot of people calling for revolution. Every day. I see it on screens. People say it to me, whisper it to me, mutter it to me. And I understand the hunger and the passion. I honestly do. The same thought goes through my mind regularly. I'm not sure who said it first, but one good line among many at the moment goes, I used to worry we were going to have a revolution. Now I'm more frightened by the thought we won't have one. I get that. I really do. Revolution is always opposed by those who think they're doing fine the way things are. But at the same time, it's the desperate desire of people left behind, people left with nothing to lose. If a system's working for you, as long as you're, to some extent, a beneficiary of it, if it's putting the roof over your head, and if it's putting funds in your pension pot and guaranteeing you a holiday and a new car, if you're a beneficiary of the system, it's easy enough to turn a blind eye towards those who are suffering out in the proverbial, if not the literal, cold. But if the moment comes and you finally find yourself on the outside of that system that once served you, if you find yourself dumped out of it, in fact, then all at once the failings and the injustices of it seem obvious. In that state of mind, in that initial outrage, thoughts of revolution to sweep away all the bad are intoxicating. Out with the old and in with the new. A new broom sweeps clean and all that. Even let's burn it all down. The problem with revolution, though, the problem with every revolutionary movement is that revolution is based on premeditated sabotage. Every revolution is destructive by nature, and that destruction serves not the downtrodden masses doing the wrecking and burning. It serves the same old powerful that the revolution is supposed to remove. That every revolution serves not the people but the powerful is hard to accept. What every revolution destroys, along with lives and property, is continuity. Every revolution serves the powerful, in that the violence, the purging fire, makes sure those downtrodden masses put to the flame the evidence of all that went before. It's in this way that revolutions do the dirty work of the powerful. They destroy the proof of all the wrongdoing of the powerful. And so they make sure people forget what was done to them and by whom. It seems to me that what matters more than anything else, what makes real change possible, if it's change you're after, is remembering. Remembering. Some of what we must learn to do, relearn how to do, is to remember. Because it's remembering, memory itself, that's the most powerful weapon against the powerful. Once you learn to remember, once you learn to keep track of what happened yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, 100, 1,000, if you remember all that and teach the next generation to continue the work of remembering in an unbroken line, unpunctuated by chaos and the destruction that chaos brings, then the repeating patterns are obvious. Once you can remember, you see, in truth, you cannot miss the fact that the same things are done to people like you and me, over and over. Some say the bad times that come, the bad things that happen, are just the product of incompetence. It's just mistakes made inadvertently by well-intentioned governments who are only doing their best, yada, yada, yada. But if it was that, if it was genuine mistakes we were talking about, then surely from time to time, some of those mistakes would work in our favour. You know, by mistake, we'd end up with more freedom and not less. By mistake, we'd sometimes end up with more money, not less. Instead, the same things happen as regular as clockwork. And every time, the things that happen benefit only and always the same few powerful and make unbearably miserable the lives of the many. It never goes the other way. Random mistakes don't work like that. If it happens, you can be damn sure it was planned. If as a society we learned this and remembered this, then we could break the pattern without violence and destruction. Violence and destruction that only serves the powerful. I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure some measure of civil disobedience or civil war or revolution is coming. I'm sure it's coming. But it will only serve the powerful. Because if it happens, it will have been made to happen, planned to happen, allowed to happen by the powerful. Revolutions are never the spontaneous activity of the downtrodden masses. Far from it. And remember, when all else fails, they take you to war. And war it has been, one war after another, over and over, forever. The sabres are being rattled again, even as I speak. 1 million dead in Ukraine. It's probably an out-of-date number by now. I've been saying it for months. And there are calls for more meat to be fed into the grinder. World War I made the powerful richer. World War II made them richer again. If we could only remember, we could build instead of regularly doing that dirty work. And at the same time having ourselves forget, yet again, burying the truth of it all in mass graves marked with Portland stones. There'll be no easy, quick fixes for people made dumb by generations of miseducation, people afflicted with cultural amnesia, cultural Alzheimer's. People don't like hearing it, but we're getting stupider. Some of the foundations for a better future, once and for all, are about the things we teach our children. This week, I read an article by an old GB News colleague of mine, Andrew Doyle. It was an essay, I think it was on Substack, I'm not sure, but it was titled Children Deserve Better Books. Quote, in my former life as a school teacher, I was often frustrated by the core texts on the syllabus, many of which struck me as overly simplistic. It was a form of intellectual coddling. Andrew's right. Of course he's right. Our children do deserve better, and they deserve better in so many ways, and that betterment is down to us, because nobody else cares. Another part of the challenge ahead is facing up to just how comprehensively and deliberately our species has being made dumber. Just about everyone's got a smartphone, the world's wisdom at our fingertips, but in reality, as individuals, we know less and less. We know how to do less and less. IQ levels are falling. That's a measured fact. Look it up on your smartphone. We can look stuff up on our phones, but only if we know enough to realise what it is we don't know, what we need to know. And another looming threat made real by technology, like our smartphones, another threat is only having access to what has escaped the censor, what's been allowed by the censor. In a digital future, where all content is owned and controlled by the powerful, how will we know what we're reading? How will we even know it's what it claims to be? You might download a copy of something called Moby Dick or A Tale of Two Cities, but how will you know the words you're reading are the same words that were written by Herman Melville and Charles Dickens? Content of classic literature is already under attack for not fitting with the ideology of the moment. If it only exists in digital form, ones and zeros, then once it's changed by whoever's owning it, once it's changed to suit the ideologues, how will you know? And more importantly, how would you access the original if you don't have it as a physical book? Whoever holds and owns content can shape it any way they want. I harp on about physical books. talk about how, if I could, I'd have an aircraft hangar, climatically controlled, and I'd fill it full of second-hand books. But I harp on and on about it, but I think books matter more than most people are invited to think. You know, the devil's in the details. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. As recently as 1953, which is not even a lifetime ago, not a long lifetime, American author Raymond Bradbury wrote a sci-fi novel called Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 happens to be the temperature at which paper combusts, the temperature at which paper spontaneously bursts into flames. And the novel is about a future in which firemen are no longer the people who put out fires. Instead, in that future, firemen hunt for and burn books. So the novel follows a fireman called Guy Montag, who begins to question what he's doing. He begins to worry about burning books. He worries about the censorship, the destruction of knowledge, which is what it comes down to. And by the end of the novel, he has abandoned his old life. Actually, a nuclear war, and war again, but a nuclear war has destroyed it anyway. And at the end, he has found a community of people, each one of whom has learned a book by heart. They've memorised books like David Copperfield and the rest, so that they can preserve it. It's graven on their hearts. It's indelibly printed on their brains, because they've understood that knowledge is that precious. Bradbury, the man, the author, had been terrified as a child by seeing footage of Nazi book burning during World War II. And he was aware that the Soviets were doing the same thing. And he was aware of the targeting of writers during the political upheaval known as the McCarthy era, which was, as we understand it now, having had access to the receipts, it was a time of communist spies infiltrating every level of the US establishment. McCarthy was right. But after a lifetime of being fascinated by history, as I have been, it's only been in recent years that I've come to understand how much misinformation I was fed about the past. The truth of it all is frighteningly different from what I was taught and what I believed and repeated for the longest time. One of the most powerful and effective tactics of the powerful, the same powerful that hold on to power generation after generation, is having the people forget what happened. If people, indeed the species Homo sapiens, fails to remember, then we're at the mercy of the powerful, who can and will and do tell us anything they want. They can change it and edit it and redact it, make it up as they go along, and they do. By war and by revolution, one great reset after another, the books are burned, literally and metaphorically. Continuity is disrupted, interrupted, destroyed, and in its absence we are left like goldfish, remembering the last few seconds and nothing else. It's not only about keeping books, of course it's not. It's about ensuring we keep receipts for everything. Remember everything they do to us. I see this week, The Times and The Spectator, supposed bastions of British media, are finally reporting that Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky is an authoritarian. Their word.
Amazon.
Their word. And that his regime is not democratic. Oh, really? And that he and those around him are corrupt. Do you think so? The Times and The Spectator. I happen to remember, and I have the receipts to prove it, I happen to remember saying all of that and more besides about Zelensky and his Nazis years ago and being vilified as a Putin apologist. Nobody else would say it, or hardly anybody else would say it, a few honourable exceptions, of course. The Times and The Spectator were saying something entirely different back then. Tulsi Gabbard is out there as well, making plain the claim that Russia put Trump in the White House was a hoax. Russiagate. She's saying that the powerful people pushing Russiagate were knowingly pushing a hoax. They were actively and knowingly hoaxing the US population. We're not supposed to remember anything. All manner of propaganda and psyops are deployed against us by those powerful to have us forget it all, to forget any of it ever happened. COVID, what was that? We're taught to say about the dead of war At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. But that's not good enough. Because the context in which we're supposed to remember them is wrong. The dead are still dead. But they died in a world altogether different from the one that's been described to us for the last 100 years. The explanations for it all are different. What we must do is know what really happened, why those wars and everything else happened. We have to know it and to remember it. That much will be a start.